Right. Good evening. Welcome back to Decoding Talmud. So originally we were set out to have this as a 4-week course. So we will work on getting to the end of this piece of the Talmud, getting up to 2 dots, sort of wrapping up the sugya, wrapping up this topic. We got lucky. Well, I got lucky. We chose a lot of the topics when it comes to the Talmud could go on sometimes for 3 or 4 pages. One of the reasons why I chose this topic is because it has a sort of end to its discussion, although the discussion continues. But this aspect of it has a lot of the common steps of Talmud, but sort of comes to 2 dots, which 2 dots means that we finished this section, this topic being discussed being discussed. So we're going to do things a little different today. To be able to get to the 2 dots, that's the end of this section. And we're also going to go through a bit of a review, but together with the review, I want to cover the different rules, the different topics, more than the topics, more discuss the rules that we or the logics or the different steps that we engaged with, and we worked through, at least on a start for a first course of the different steps that there are in the Talmud. So focusing obviously on what we learned, but also focusing on the rules that have implications later on. Anytime you were to open up a Talmud. So we'll start with a quick review. We'll do I'll do what I call the power review, where we'll read from the beginning to where we're up to. We'll review. We'll move a little bit on a faster pace through the Talmud, obviously making sure we understand it, not to skip on that, and then finish off with, I created a bit of a slideshow, just going through the steps and also just like pointing out the rules. And I remember last time a few of you asked that it be shared, so later on tonight I'll finish up on that, and or tomorrow, and I'll send it over to Rabbi Solish for all those that would like. Could share, and then we'll finish off the class with a bit of a discussion if there's interest in having a second series. If what topics if you have any ideas of what could be done differently, if there's different focuses that some people would like to have, so we'll do that towards the end. All right. So I'm going to share my page now. We'll start with we'll do a quick review outside as well. Let me see, there's some more students than there were the past, some class members. So hopefully we'll be able to have everyone up to place without, yeah. Okay, so we'll go through the Gemara quickly outside, then quickly inside, and then we will continue. I'll share the slide, although we won't focus on it, on parts of the slide right away, but I have it broken down here. Okay. Well, once it's loaded. Right, so just I guess while I'm waiting for this to load, there we go. All right. So just the first thing that we had is, right, the Talmud is made up of the Mishnah. It was written by the Tanoim, or singular called the Tana, which is translated as a teacher. And again, it was compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, but it's all the rabbis from the era from 32 BCE to 219 CE. So that's just a general piece of information, a general thing worthy of knowing. Whenever you learn a Mishnah, you have a Reisha. Well, not always, but almost always you have a Reisha and a Seifa. A Reisha is the head, the beginning. A Seifa is the end, which is that any Mishnah that's made up of two rules. The first one's called the Reisha. The second one is called the Seifa. I put this in here, although our Mishnah doesn't have one. There is also a Mitziusa. Some Mishnahs are compiled of three cases or three details, so that would be a Mitziusa, a middle case. What is the Reisha of our Mishnah? The first case that we had in our Mishnah that we studied is somebody deposited a cow or a vessel. The cow or the vessel was stolen from the watchman. The watchman decided that he's going to pay instead of swear. Then the person who stole it was found. And the rule is that when you steal something, if you get caught, you have to pay double. So the Reisha, the beginning of our Mishnah, tells us that the watchman will get, because he paid instead of swearing. Because he paid, he will end up with the being paid twice, or in some cases 4 or 5. That's the Reisha of our Mishnah. That's the first case of our Mishnah. The Seifa of our Mishnah, the second part of our Mishnah, is again very similar. Somebody deposited something by his friend. It was stolen. Number 3. Oh, I made a mistake. Whoops. Okay. I copy pasted and I forgot to change. So, yeah. Let me change that. Sorry. Where am I here? Sorry about that. Let me, I'll point it out here, but when before I send it out, I'll make sure to change that. Point 3, he swore and he didn't pay. Again, a swearing is that anybody that watches something for somebody else, if it gets stolen, he needs to swear that he wasn't negligent, and then he wouldn't have to pay. So in this situation, in the end of the Mishnah, he decided that he's going to swear and not pay. Then the person that stole it was found. So again, this is my second mistake, is the one who deposited the object, he will get the double, or the 4 or the 5. So that is the first rule that we discussed. Just the first, again, that's the Mishnah, and the main rules that we discussed in the Mishnah is that what the Mishnah is, and the idea of most Mishnahs are made up of a Reisha and a Seifa. If anyone has any questions, please ask. Please ask. All right. Then we move on to the Gemara, the Talmud. We pointed out that when there's the Gimel Mem in the Gemara, let me write that. It means that we're starting the Talmud part of it. That was compiled over the years of 2019 to 500. It was compiled in the year 500 CE, but from the teachings from the Amora, one who says, one who explores, it was the Talmud is based on the teachings of the discussions, dialogues, debates that the Amoraim had, and that was compiled by Rav Ashi and Rav Ishia. But then again, that was compiled. But the main thing is that it's the teachings of the Amoraim. So that's just a general input about the Gemara. Then the first step of our Gemara, and really we pointed out that that's almost every Gemara. Most Gemaras start with exploring the wording of the Mishnah. That's the general rule that's worthy of knowing for any Mishnah you'll open up, is in most cases, the first thing we discuss is the wording. In our situation, we start with wondering why the Mishnah states vessels and animals. So that was our question. Rule number 2 that we had. So once the Gemara deals with that, the Talmud asks, why does the Mishnah need to use vessels and animals? So we pointed out the idea of a tzricha, it is needed, or a tzrichusa, which is when the Gemara will explain what each aspect is necessary. That usually comes up in a case where there's two rules, which one of them seem extra, or in our case where you have a Mishnah that has two words, and our goal is to explain you the uniqueness and the individuality of each one of those, while why each one is necessary and why each one is important. So that is a tzricha, a tzrichusa, it is needed. So every time you see the word tzricha in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, that means we explained, or we will explain, what is unique about each one and why you wouldn't be able to understand one from the other. In our Gemara, in our piece of Talmud, what we ended up explaining is that if the Mishnah would have either said vessel or said animal without mentioning the other one, we will not know that the law applies by the other one. And that is because if the Mishnah would only say that I could get the double, that the watchman gets the double by a case of a cow, I would think only because there's lots of work involved. As we mentioned, when I'm watching something for you, I have to also take responsibility for it. I have to take some level of care for it. I mentioned that there was the whole Talmud about when you have somebody's rugs, or you have somebody's Sefer Torah, expensive rugs, how you have to deal with it, what you have to do for it, if you have to unroll it, if you need to hit it with a stick, right? So the same thing with the cow. A cow you have to take, you have to feed, you have to clean out the barn, you have to take him out for his walk. So I would think in such a case you get the double. That's why I also need to mention vessels. And then the second aspect is if we would only say vessels, but we wouldn't say animals, so then I would think only by a vessel where the financial gains, the financial futures are not so great, because it could only be double. In such a case, I'm ready to sell you that possibility. But the case of an animal, which involves getting 4 or 5 times, perhaps you wouldn't. So that's why the Mishnah needs to say both. There needs to be a tzrichusa. They are both needed. That's that was the second rule. So again, so far our Mishnah has the idea of exploring the wording, and we take the route. Our Talmud takes the route of a tzrichusa. It is needed. Each one of those words are needed. The next step that we had was the rule of a maskif, a challenge from an amora. I'm going to throw it out. We didn't have it. I'm just going to put it out there for perhaps future reference. But there's another word in the Talmud that comes out mibayile, which is similar to mask. It's also a challenge, but that usually means that it came from the era of the Mishnah, the era of the Mishnah. So it was one Tana asking the other Tana. Maskif just gives us a reference to what era it was, but it's a challenge from an Amora. Now, a challenge, what I mean to say by a challenge is that we are using a higher power to challenge what was said. And over here I put in parentheses source, but in truth it's not always a source. It could also be an intellectual question. And as a challenge, when you see the word maskif in the Talmud, it means that we're telling you that the question that we have, either because we have a source for it or because it's that strong intellectually, will void your whole opinion or your notion if you can't answer it. So whenever you see a maskif, or that means that I am disproving you, or that means that I'm challenging you enough that if you don't have a solid answer, your previous opinion, or your thought will be void based on what I asked you. So again, that is the rule of a maskif. And just for added addition, maskif means that it's coming from the era of the Amora. Now, how did that translate in our Gemara? This was step number 3. After we said that you could buy the financial rights, the Talmud comes and asks you, or Rami asks you, how is it possible to buy futures if they're non-existent yet? And we bring from the source that one can't buy something that doesn't exist yet. That's how our Talmud took it. Do we have a question? No. Yeah. So that was our third step of our Talmud. The fourth step of the topic that we're of our section of the Talmud that we're discussing is I didn't have the proper Aramaic wording for it, but it's we refute a possible proof countering our view, which is right. It's a very common practice in law or in any such thing. You may think this and this, so let me tell you, it is not. How did we use that in our Talmud? Is we tried challenging the view of buying financial rights based on the fact that it's not existent yet. So we bring a proof from a rabbi that you could buy something that's non-existent. Point out that would only be in a situation that it's likely to happen. For example, a date tree. However, we point out that in our situation, getting the double is so unlikely that it's totally not existent in this world. So how are we even discussing this idea of purchasing futures that are just so distant from reality, so distant from this actual world? So we're still at a point. We're still at a point of maskiv. We still are at a point. We're at a point of challenge because we're trying to understand how does our Mishnah allow the watchman to get the double if at what moment do I get, let's say I'm the watchman, at what moment do I get the rights that I purchase, that I acquire the rights of the double? At what moment did that happen? Because you can't just, it's not possible for the depositor to just give it over to me without there being a moment of that transaction happening. So that is where we're still at the moment of the, right. So where we finished off last week, I believe, is we redefine. And this is a common Gemara practice. And again, this is not just Gemara, this is any logical discussion that there is. The Gemara will tell you, and again, I didn't use Aramaic word for this because this could come in the Gemara. The Talmud could use different wordings for this. Could be after a question, we say Amar Rav Papa. Rav Papa said, meaning to say he's answering, or rather Rav Papa said would also be a similar thing. So usually when you have a rabbi, well, meaning not a rabbi as in a 2020 rabbi, a Amora in the Talmud coming right after a challenge, many times it means that we're about to redefine. So what are we about to redefine? And this is where we finished last week. Rava says as follows. Rava says, you have thought that I was only buying, you understood that the Mishnah is that I'm only buying the futures. I'm going to tell you that at the moment of purchase, when I, the watchman, paid you, instead of swearing to you, you not only sold me the futures, you didn't just sell me the financial rights, you also sold me the actual cow from the moment of deposit. So retroactively, you sold me the cow. And in Jewish law, that is something that is accepted. You could buy things retroactively. And I'm sure there's some people on this class that know a lot more than me about this in American law. But the one example that I think of, and again, I don't know how it works in Georgia, but I can imagine it's the same. I know my sister bought a house in New York, and she bought the house, but retroactively she had to pay all the fines that the house got over the past many years. It was an abandoned house, and whoever the bank owned it, and they weren't whatever. I'm not sure the exact details, but she got the house in 2000, and she got it 2 years ago. So she got it 2018, but retroactively they had to take care of all the fines that were on the house from the year 2000, fines and taxes that were on the house from the year around 2010. Right? So that would be a similar thing where okay, so that's where we finished off last week, where Rava says our Mishnah is discussing about the financial rights, but at the same point, you're the reason in other you're getting the financial rights, you're getting the double from the person who stole it, not just because you have the rights, because he stole your cow. So, right, the example that just to give it a time frame, if the cow was deposited by me on October 1st, it was stolen on October 10th. October 20th, I paid for it. On October 30th, the person who stole it was found. Rava said that at the moment of October 20th, the October 20th, when I paid instead of swearing, the cow became mine. I forgot one detail. Did I? Sorry, let me do this again. October 1st, I paid. You deposited by me. October 10th, it was stolen from me. October 20th, I paid for it. October 30th, the person that stole it was found, and now he needs to pay double. Rava says something fascinating, that at the moment of October 20th, when I paid for it, I get the cow from October 1st. So whose cow was stolen October 10th? My cow. So now Rava took this discussion away from futures to investments. Right? He says, I bought the cow, I didn't just buy the future financial benefits that come from it. That's where we were up to in our Gemara. That's where we finished last week. 2 weeks ago, we finished off a little bit in a fast pace. So just to reiterate that idea, Rava tells us that I didn't buy the financial rights, I'm buying the actual cow retroactively from October 1st. And therefore, any financial rights that might come later on belong to me because I own the cow, right? Once I buy a house, if I got lucky and 2 days later the house went up $500,000, it's my house. So that is where we're up to in the Gemara. That I'm going to now pull up the Merkava. We'll continue with steps 6 and 7 as we go along. This is just where I just wanted to do what we did so far. So just again, the quick rules that we discussed. We discussed the Mishnah, that there's a Reish and a Seifa, beginning and end. We discussed that most Gemaras start with exploring the wording. Rule number 3 was a tzrichusa. It's needed when the Talmud will define each one and tell us why each one is unique. Then we had rule number 4 was skill number 4 with the Talmud, when the Talmud refutes a challenge before you could even bring it. So it's not in a challenging way. The Talmud tells you, you may think this and this. Let me tell you, don't even consider that challenge. And number 5 is when we redefine the situation, when we're answering the challenge by redefining, not by trying to find the loophole, but rather by redefining the rule or redefining the reason behind it. And therefore the challenge naturally falls away because now we're looking at this case from a different angle. All right. So how do I get out of this? Okay. I'm just going to go, we're going to do the Gemara inside. here with the Merkava. And when we get to the new piece, we will, so as we did in the past, I'll just read it quickly. Listen along. If you have any questions on the translations, let me know. Or right, Hamafkedei, one who deposits by his friend, behema o kelim, a animal or a vessel, v'nignevu, it was stolen, o she'avdu, or they were lost. Shilem v'lo ratza lishava, he paid and he did not want to swear. The watchman decided that he's paying. Sharei amru, behold, they said, shomer chinam nishba v'yotze, unpaid watchman could swear and go out. Meaning, he decided not to do that. Rather, he decided that he's going to pay instead of swear. Nimtza ganev, the one who stole it was found. Mishalim tashlum kofel, he paid the payments of double. Tabachu machar, if the person who stole it cooked it or sold it, Mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha, he pays the payment of 4 or 5. Lemi mishalim, to whom does he pay? Lemisha pekadon etzlo, to who the deposit is by. I'm the watchman, I paid for the object, I get all financial rights that might come out of it. That's the Reisha of the Mishnah. Nishba v'lo ratza lishalem, if he swears and he doesn't want to pay. Nimtza ganev, the one who stole it was found. Mishalim tashlum kofel, he pays the payment of double. Tavachu machar, if he cooked it or he sold it, meaning the one who stole it, cooked it or sold it, mishalim tashlume arba v'chamisha, he pays the payment of 4 or 5. Lemi mishalim, to whom does he pay? Bala pikadon, to the person who deposited it. In this case, I didn't pay for the object. I swore. I did what Torah tells me to do. But because I never paid the depositor, once that person who stole it was found, we got to pay the person that's cows was stolen gets the double. Gemara, right? So this is what we're saying. The Gimel Mem means that this is the beginning of a Gemara. The Talmud is starting. Till there was the Mishnah, now is the Talmud. Says the Gemara, for the yeshiva language, frek the Gemara. Asks the Gemara, Lama lala misni behema, why does the Tana, why does the Mishnah need to teach animal? The Lama leila misni kelim, and why does the Mishnah need to teach vessels? Answers the Gemara, Srichi, I need both. So I was saying that was skill number 2. When the Talmud tells me Srichi, Srichusa, we're telling you, we're about to point out why you need each one. The Itana behema, for if he taught animal, havamina, I would have said, behema hu demakni lekfela, by an animal, the depositor sells the double, the right of the double to the watchman. Why? Mishum denafish tircha, for there's a lot of burden, liyayule yulefuke, to bring him in and to take him out, to deal with the animal. Aval kelim, however, vessels, the loy nafish tirichayu, that there isn't a lot of burden, ema loy makni lekfela, perhaps you will say that he doesn't sell him the double, meaning that the depositor doesn't sell the double to the watchman. If the Tana, so that's why I must say animal. I must say vessels, because if I wouldn't say vessels, I wouldn't know to include that. If he would have taught, the Tana would have taught vessels, hava mina kelim hu dekamakni lekvela, I would have said that by double is when he sells him. So I would have said by vessels that he sells him the double, mishum delay nafish kvilayu, for it's not more, because it doesn't amount to more than double. Delay nafish kvilayu, it's never more than double. Vessels, the return on the vessels could never be 100%, more than 100% profit. Aval behema, however, by an animal, the chitava chumachar, in a situation where he cooked it or he sold it, the one who stole it will need to pay 4 or 5 times. And perhaps I would tell you that I'm not ready to sell you that potential profit. So that's why our Mishnah needs to tells us, perhaps I would say he's not ready to sell the double. Sricha, therefore I need to have both. I need to have the Mishnah tell me vessels. I need to have the Mishnah tell me animal. So that is the first sort of, right? So at this conclusion, we know why the Mishnah needs to say vessel and why the Mishnah needs to say animal. Now, Maskif law, Rami Bar Chama challenges this. He's uncomfortable with he's not uncomfortable. He's not willing to accept this idea that we're discussing financial benefits or only financial benefits. What's his challenge? Vaha ein adam makner davar shlei bala olam. Vaha, and behold, a person cannot sell something that didn't come to the world yet. Let's just stop there. The question is, so then how, if all you're selling the watchman, if the only benefit you're giving the watchman is the financial rights that might occur later, what are you selling him? It's not existent. So when are you giving him the rights? Now, even according to Rameir that does say, a person could sell something off that didn't come to the world. Hani mili, these words, meaning when does Rameir allow such a purchase? Kigon peris dakel, similar to fruits of a date tree, the avidi da asu, for they are likely to come. Aval hacha, however, over here, and now we move on to Daf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. Right, we got in this corner right here. So but in our situation, first of all, miyemer de meganva, who says that the object will be stolen. Ve'im timtzalomer de meganva, and if you would like to say that the object will be stolen, situation detail number 2, the miyomar de mishtakich ganev, who says that the ganev will ever be found. So we're already 2 possibilities away from you not getting your double. A, who says it's going to be stolen? Number 2, if it is stolen, who says you will find the guy that stole it? V'i mishtachach ganev, and if the ganev will be found, mi yemer de mishali, who says he will need to pay the double? Dilma modiu miftar, perhaps he's going to admit and he will not need to pay the double. So you need 3 things to fall in place to get the double. And if so, it's something that's non-existent. So how could you sell that? That's the Gemara's question. Amar Rava says, as I mentioned, so here Rava, it's interesting that a lot of times when we're answering a question, it doesn't say that we're answering. Maskif is he's challenging. When you're answering, it's just Amar Rava. Rava says, because it's important to pay attention to that. Amar Rava says, Nase ka Omer lo, it becomes as if he said to him. It becomes as if the one who deposited it, it's as if the one that deposited it told the watchman, Lichesh etignov, when it will get stolen, or if it will get stolen, v'tirtze v'tishalmeni, and you would pay me, meaning you would like to pay me instead of swearing. Hare parasi kenuya lach me'achshav, behold, my cow was sold to you from now, from the moment of when the deposit is given over. So this is till where we got last week. So now, what we're about to do is we're going to challenge this idea. What is this idea? This idea is, and just to use the example that I gave before, what day, according to Rava, what day did the cow become mine? If I'm the watchman, what day did the cow become mine? October 1st. Although I paid for it on October 20th, right? Based on this statement, when you pay, if it gets stolen and you pay me, my cow is sold to you retroactively from today, from the day I gave it to you. So the cow became mine on October 1st. So whose cow was stolen? My cow was stolen. And therefore I get the double. That's Rava's answer. But Rav Zera is going to challenge him. And he's going to tell him that I have a source to disprove your logic. What is that? And this was, I don't remember, in a few of the classes, it was people, it was asked what would be the ruling with any offsprings, with the babies. So I mentioned that we're going to get to that. So here we have this. Maskivla Reb Zera. Reb Zera challenges this. He's challenging this notion that the cow becomes mine, the watchman's, on October 1st. Ihachi. If so, that the cow is the watchman's, afilu gezusa velo de sehanami. Even its offsprings and its shearings should also go to the watchman. Based on this logic, that retroactively the cow becomes mine, with all futures that might occur, right? Because the depositor, the owner of the cow, is selling me both. He's selling me the actual cow, and he's selling me any futures. What's included in any futures that might occur? Babies and shearings. For a sheep, right? If I share, if I should get all the benefits, the wool that was sold should go to who? Should become the watchman's. Now that would be great. That would be great. That would be a great investment for the watchman. He pays for one cow. He ends up with the babies. He ends up with the shearings. And he ends up with the double. The problem is, and this is where his attack comes, Alma Tanya. However, we learned in the Baraisa. A Baraisa is the leftovers of the Mishnah. The Baraisa is the Baraita is a section of teachings that come from the era of the Tanoim, of the Tana. They are as powerful as a Mishnah as long as they're not countering a Mishnah. So there's a lot of discussion around the power and what happened to the Baraisa, but in very short, the general idea of a Baraisa is that there were teachings that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the author of the Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, the prince, didn't put into the Mishnah, or because he wasn't aware of it yet, or because it's very similar to the Mishnah but just has some extra information, and he was assuming that that information could be figured out on his own. But again, a Brisa is as powerful, comes from the same era of the Mishnah, from the same teachers, and as long as it doesn't counter a Mishnah, we accept it as powerful as a Mishnah. If it's a Brisa that was taught by the teachers, by the students of Rabbi Yehuda. So here, again, and there's a lot of interesting letters and discussion about the exact why some of them were chosen to be part of the Mishnah, why some of them were chosen to be part of the Baraita. But there is a Baraita, but again, the main thing is to understand that they are as powerful as a Mishnah. And therefore, we have Ilma Tanya, whatever we learned in the Brisa, and this is where his this is where the uppercut comes. This is where his challenge comes. Chutz migezusa velo deseha. The watchman receives everything, excluding, he gets the double. He gets the 4 or 5 times. But what he doesn't get is, he doesn't get the shearings and he doesn't get the babies, the offspring. So that's a challenge to what Rava said, that the cow became mine. Because if the cow is mine, why are the offspring not mine? If the cow's mine, or if the sheep's mine, why are the shearings not mine? Right? So that's the from here till here is a challenge on this notion that the cow became mine from the day of the deposit. Because if so, why do I only get the double, and why don't they get the offspring and the shearing? If the cow is mine, everything is mine. Or that's what we think. So let me just read that question one more time. Maskiv la Reb Zera. Reb Zera challenges Rava. Ihachi. If so, that the cow is mine from the day you deposited by me, afilu gezusa velo desao nami, even the offsprings and the shearings should also go to the watchman. Ilma Tanya, however, we have the Breita, chutz me gezusa velo deseha. I get the double, I get the 4 or 5 times, but I don't get the offsprings or the shearing. So that seemingly is a challenge to, that's a challenge to Rava's opinion. Before we go to the answer, is there, and this, tell me if there's, is there an idea in American law or in just a logical law that you end up purchasing certain profits but not all? Is there a scenario where I could purchase a product and some of the futures will be mine, some of the futures will stay the previous owners?
So I don't know about official law, but if you have an example of like, I buy a desk and the desk happens to have $1,000 in it and the owner didn't know, I should return that $1,000 to the original owner. I don't know if that.
Right. True. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. There was actually we did a debate here that Rabbi Solish actually I teach in a school here. Rabbi Solish was the mediator, and one of the questions that the students had to deal with was with that question. Right. There was actually a really beautiful story a couple of years ago where a teacher in a local yeshiva in Far Rockaway bought like a desk in a garage sale and found like $30,000, like a huge amount of money. And it was like, it made it all over the news how he returned it. Yeah. So is there, and again, this is more like a discussion. Is there such a thing where I could, right. So that's one example. I know, is there such a thing as in buying, I guess, and again, this is more of a thought, buying off a company that's like, I don't know. I'm thinking, but getting stuck here. If there's such a thing where you end up purchasing something but only acquire half the futures.
I don't know if this addresses your question. From the start, you could contract with somebody to buy their cow with the understanding that any calves will be the original owners, or any wool or both would be the original owners. You could do that by contract ahead of time. But is that what you're wondering?
Right.
Can be done?
Yeah. So I'm wondering.
You could agree ahead of time to arrangement like that.
Right. I'm wondering if there's something that there's like, so yeah, so thank you for sharing that. And we're actually going to get there. We're going to differentiate between the future, we're going to differentiate between futures. But I'm just wondering I'm wondering if there's something like this in law in like in modern day business dealings, where the assumption is well, not only could you contract is that it's sort of assumed that that's the way it is. I guess let's see what the Talmud says about that.
So I can't think of an exact example, but there is a concept in real estate, in particular in some states, where if you buy a property, you can buy the land, but oil and mineral rights do not transfer. So that's something that it may not necessarily be contractual, but it's the law.
Interesting. So you're saying let's say, just to help me understand this, if I were to buy that property and then find those things there, I didn't buy the rights for that.
Yeah, it's I'm not an expert.
Is that what it means?
Let's say air rights, but I wonder if it's like the opposite of air rights above a property.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Below.
Very interesting. Okay. It actually is very similar to what our Gemara is. Yeah. Very interesting. And actually, wow. It actually, let's see what the Talmud says, and I think we can link those two very strongly. Ella Amar Rav Zera. Rav Zera says.
So what you're saying,
Nase ka'omer.
Talmud in order to get the real estate license?
Then I was just thinking. I was wondering. I didn't have any. I wasn't planning for it to go that way. I wasn't sure where it would go. I was taking the chance. I mean, sometimes you start a discussion hoping that it's going to go a certain angle, right? As a teacher, they try, in school, they teach us how to control the discussion. This was a purely see where this goes. I didn't know it would head in that direction at all. So there was no, yeah. But it'd be interesting to see if the logic behind what we're going to say here works with the logic of the real estate, which would be fascinating. Ela Omer Rav Zera says, Nase ka'omer lo, it becomes as if the depositor tells the watchman, Chutz migezusa velo deseha. And this is, right, I am selling you the cow with all its futures, excluding its offspring and its shot and its shearings. Right? So this is going back to what Stanley said, right? About you could sort of contract that this is what I am selling you, but I'm not selling you these profits. But over here, a little different. You're not contracting it. We're assuming that that's how the business transaction is going down. That this is all assumption based, meaning the rabbis are telling you that at the moment of you giving me your object to watch for you, you're also telling me, as long as you didn't say, as long as the assumption is that when you're giving me your product to watch, and you including in that, you are also giving me the right to buy that object off of you if it was really stolen and you decided to pay me instead of making me take you to court. And here we add in a new twist that not only do you get the cow, but you don't get the shearing and the offspring. So it's as if the rabbis are telling you in the contract, we tell you that you're getting the profits of the double, but you're not getting the offspring or the shearing. So going back to the example, possibly, right? You get the rights of the property, but you're not getting the rights of the oil and the minerals. On my pascha, and this is not a challenging question, this is a wonder question. On my pascha, why do you decide that? What logic are you using to differentiate between futures, between getting double and getting a baby, and getting the profits of the offspring or the shearings? Well, my pascha, why would you do that? Or what's the logic behind your ruling to differentiate, right? Because Reb Zera is coming and telling you that you get the cow from October 1st, you get any double, but you don't get the offspring or the shearing. Says the Gemara, 2 words, stama de milsa. It's the accepted words. It's the assumption. It's logical. The reason why I'm ready to differentiate between futures, and the reason why I'm ready to differentiate between futures and offsprings and shearing, it's logic. What might be the logic? What would be the difference between offsprings, and what would be the difference between a baby, the profit of a child, of the cow giving birth, and the profit of, if it gets stolen and you find the guy in time and you get him to court, you'll get the double. Could anyone think about a logical difference between a child, the offspring, the shearings, and the double that the one who stole it might end up paying?
Speculative.
Talmud, huh?
It's speculative. The conferring the right to the double is easy because it's speculative, whereas you're almost sure you're going to have shearings and or offspring. So one is much more likely than the other and very more readily sold.
Beautiful. Ready for this? Shivcha de asami alma, a profit that comes from the world, external. Avid inish demakni, a person's ready to sell because it's external. It might not happen. It's dependent on so many external things. Shivcha de megufa, a profit that's from its body, from itself. Lai avid inish demakni, a person is not ready to sell. I'm not ready to sell you something that I gave you. I'm not ready to sell you the fact that I gave you a sheep to watch, and and it was stolen, right? It's right there in my hands. Why? I'm not selling you that. Right? Sounds similar to what we just heard from Stan. Right? There we go. So let me just do that one more time. On my pascha, why differentiate? Why do you think you should differentiate between the offspring and the double? Stam de milsa. It's logical. Shivcha de asami alma. A profit that comes from the world, from external, based on external factors, of it inish demakni, a person is ready to sell. Shivcha de migufa, a profit of its own body from itself, lay of it inish demakni, a person is not ready to sell off. With this, and again, this was we didn't plan this. Does this relate back to the law about oil and minerals? In any what way?
Seems like it.
Huh? Now, this is why I was wondering about the law with the oil and the minerals. Is it, if I knew that there was oil and minerals there, if I bought it as a place to dig oil, then obviously I get the oil rights, right? I think.
Yeah, these are situations where you're buying a place of residence.
Got it.
In an area that is known for possibly having, oil and minerals.
Right. That sounds like, it almost sounds like we're talking our Talmud, our piece of Gemara right there, right? I bought it as a residence. I bought it as a piece of real estate. Now, tomorrow morning, and this happens. I know it's 8:56 for all those. I'm willing to stay on until we get to the two dots. So for those that would like to join me, please do. I don't know. I don't know if this happens too often in Georgia, but I think two of my sisters bought houses in Brooklyn, and they both hit gold. They bought off houses that were they in both their cases they beat the market by a day. I have a sister. She bought a home for, back then was expensive because for whatever price. A day later, down the block, a house sold for $300,000 more. Now, the reason why it's interesting, because unlike the beauty of Atlanta, where each person's home is different in size and different in shape, I am talking about homes in New York, in Brooklyn, which are copies they're exactly the same. And it actually happened to two of my sisters 2 years apart. They both bought, and then a day or two later, or a week, or in that month, homes, they happened to each time get that last house on the block that was going to go at that price because the people were desperate to sell or whatever. They got very lucky, right? In such a situation, I don't think, right, the law, the seller can't come back to my sister and complain to them. But I didn't know that tomorrow the price is going to go up so much. There's nothing about your house that you sold in your house that made the house down the block go up in price. My sister got lucky, right? On the other hand, in the situation of the oil, you bought a house and then a week later you're digging because you want to build a mansion and you find out that there's minerals there. That is something I sold you. So the law assumes that you weren't ready to sell that, and therefore it wouldn't be a good sale. To me, it seems very similar to our Gemara, to our Talmud. A profit that's external, that's based on real estate markets and needs and new train stations opening or new laws being passed, there's nothing you could do about it. But a oil, me selling a property, not being aware that there's oil or minerals under it, it's similar to these words. Shivcha de megufa, a profit that comes from its own body. It's its own piece of land that I sold, that I wasn't aware of, that went up, that made it loy of it inish de makni. A person's not ready to sell. Wow. Okay, thank you. So here again, here we have, that would be the difference between offspring and the double. So that is one way of understanding our Mishnah. So one way of understanding our Mishnah is that he sells him the cow with the double, but he's not ready to sell him the profits of the offspring and the profit of the shearing, because as said in the class and as the Gemara says, one's a possibility and one's from itself. Now this is the next, these two words, as a yeshiva student, used to drive me mad. And it's as follows: Ika the Amri, there are those that say. And we're about to change the word, we're about to change the version of something. And as a yeshiva student, it used to bother me. What do you mean? I ask you a question, so what do you tell me? Oh, I'm sorry, no, I didn't mean that. It really says something else. To me, as a yeshiva student, I had a study partner that every time they used to say, okay, fine. I got to a certain point that every time I would ask a question, he would just say, yeah, just change the version. What's the problem? But as I grew up, I realized understanding how the Talmud was designed also gives us understanding about why, Rabbi Solsh, we're going over a little bit. We're going over our time because we're getting to the two dots. When it comes to understanding how the Talmud was put together, I started understanding why there is different ways there's different versions of what rabbis said. And the reason for that is because it was dialogue. There was no tweets. There was no, let's go back and see what this rabbi tweeted 3 months ago. He said something in a yeshiva. He said a speech. He was on a journey. He said a speech in a shul, in a synagogue. He gave a class. He was a guest for Intown Jewish Academy. He gave a lecture. And everybody, it was a huge crowd. And everybody heard him say it one way. He was still developing his thought. 3 years later, he was sitting and learning in yeshiva, and a student came and asked him a question. And he said, this is what I think. So he gave a speech about it 3 years ago. 100%. But so the idea that it's a dialogue, and that it's a discussion, and that it's a process of understanding things helps us understand why there are different versions. Because, and also back then they weren't documenting. There was no blogs, and there was no tweets, and there was it was a process of being figured out, right? So the first version, this goes back to Rava. That Rava said that when does he get the cow? He gets the cow from the moment that it was deposited. Ika the Amri. There are those that say, there's those that say, Amar Rava said, Nase ka'omerlo. It becomes as, where am I? I'm losing it. Nase ka'omerlo, it's as if he said to him, Lichesha tignov, when it gets stolen, v'tirtza v'tishalmeni, and you would like to pay me, samoch legnevusa knuyalach, it is sold to you close to the time of it being stolen. Retroactively, it's sold to you 10 minutes before the object was stolen. So let's go back. October 1st, the product was deposited by me. October 10th, it was stolen from me. October 20th, I paid for it. According to this version, when did the cow become mine? The cow became mine October 10th, 5 minutes before the cow was stolen. That now, my beinayu, what's the difference between this version and the version of that it was sold to him from the day of it deposited? Ika beinayu, there's a difference between the two. So again, whenever we see these words, my beinayu is we're asking what's the distinction between these two different perspectives. Or sometimes the Talmud would say it when we bring two laws that sound very similar, we ask you, but really, what's the difference? My beinayu, what's the difference between each angle that you're coming from? Says the Talmud, Ika beinayu. There's a difference between the two versions of Rava. Number one, Kushya de Rab Zera. Number one is the question of Rab Zera. Meaning, Rab Zera had a question, what will be the rule with the offspring and the shearing? So according to the first version, that Rava said that the cow becomes the watchman's from the day of the deposit, you have that question. According to the second opinion, according to the second version, that Rava said the cow becomes yours 10 minutes before it was stolen, you don't have that question. Because your cow was stolen, but your cow didn't have a baby or have or any shearings. Inami, if also another possibility between the difference, if the cow becomes mine the day of the deposit or the day that it was stolen, is the kaima ba'agam, if the cow is standing in a meadow. What would be the difference? If the cow was standing in a meadow at the time of it being stolen, meaning it wasn't stolen from the watchman's property, then the watchman can't get it because it wasn't in his property to acquire it. So here we have till the 2 dots. I know we rushed through the end a little bit. If anyone has any questions on the meaning of it, please ask. But again, we finish off this section of the section, the sugya, with saying another version for Rava is that he's told him that the cow becomes yours. The cow becomes yours a little bit before it was stolen. And therefore, we don't have the question of Reb Zera about what would be the rule with the shearing and the offspring. And another thing is that if it was stolen from a meadow and if it's not in my property that moment, so then it's not mine, meaning I wouldn't get the double. So here we have a 2 dots. A 2 dots means the end of a sugya, the end of a section. So we covered almost what we call a Amud Gemara, a side of Gemara, but we got lucky that we got a full section of Talmud in these 4 weeks. So yeah. Let me just finish off here with the slideshow that we started earlier. If I could, it's making me problems. Again, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. So we were just go here. Right. So we went earlier until this area of Rava, that Rava said that it becomes him from the moment he gave the cow. Then we challenged that. And again, a maskiv is a challenge from a Amora. He's using a higher power or a power, a source, or he's using the power of intellect to fully disprove the previous notion. Right? So what does he attack? He says, based on you, Rava, one should be getting the offsprings and the shearings. However, Tanya, this is a important rule. Tanya it was taught in a brisa. Interestingly, here you have to always use your logic. Is it a proof? Is it a question? Is it an answer? There could be Tanya, it was taught in a brisa, could be a proof or a question. Over here, it's a question. We use a source to tell us that you don't get the offsprings and the shearings, which seems to imply that the cow doesn't become yours at the moment of deposit. So we go to step number 8, which again, step number 8 was we redefine. Over here we Ella Amar, rather he said. We redefine by saying that you get the cow, you get the futures, but you don't get the offsprings. That was step number 8. So then we asked, if so, we were wondering, why would you differ between the offsprings and why would you differ between the futures about futures of the double and the futures of offsprings? Says the Gemara, logical. We differentiate between gains that come internally or externally, ones that are come from itself, or however you want to put it, but there's a huge difference between profits that are natural and profits that come from possibilities. That is, and then we asked, then we pointed out, and again, before I send this to Rabbi Solish, I'll add in some information here. Ika de Amri. Then we brought another version for Rava, that rather he said that the cow becomes yours moments before it was stolen. And then we asked, my benayu, what's the difference between these two versions? Is there an actual practical, halachic, or an intellectual difference, whether it becomes yours moments before it was stolen or at the moment of deposit? Answers the Gemara, Ika benayu, there is a huge difference. And we pointed out, number one, you don't have to deal with the question regarding shearings. And number two is what happens if it was stolen from a meadow, makes a big difference whether the cow became yours at the moment of deposit or it became yours at the moment of stealing. Right, so I am still around, but I'm gonna finish off with a little l'chaim over here, if anybody wants to join me for finishing this this section of Gemara, having that opportunity of learning some Gemara, some fascinating discussions. Thank you guys for participating and making it interesting. So l'chaim. We should have the opportunity to take the Torah, internalize it, and let it elevate us and put us in that right, in the godly mindset. I saw a letter of the Rebbe from years ago written to a lawyer, and he asked the Rebbe for a blessing, for advice which business deal he should do. And the Rebbe very interestingly answered him, connect to the source of intellect. My blessing to you is that you should connect to the source of intellect, and then you'll already know which business deals to do. So he was getting lucky there. The Rebbe wasn't giving him advice for one business deal. The Rebbe was giving him advice for multiple. So hopefully with our connecting to God's intellect of learning Torah, that will inspire our soul, but also inspire our intellect to be in a higher place and be able to make choices wiser and better than ever before. L'chaim.
L'chaim. Rabbi Jacobson, thank you very much. Yasher koach. Round of applause for Rabbi Jacobson for teaching this incredible 4-part series. Yasher koach, thank you. And thank you to all of you for joining. Rabbi, did you mention about a possibility of another series, maybe a different topic?
Yes, I did mention that in the beginning, but we didn't get to that at the end yet.
Got it.
So I mentioned earlier that there was Rabbi Solish did have this discussion about possibly having a second series to see if guys would be interested, if anybody would be interested, and if they would like the setting the way it was, or would they like to see a different topic or different ideas being focused on, whether in the class what to focus on more, or just any changes they would like to see or topics they would like to be learned.
Okay.
So
good. So think about it, everybody, and then maybe we'll follow up by email. Maybe I'll send that an email and just let me know.
Good.
Does that sound good?
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay,
Rabbi,
good.
I'm going to share with you this slideshow. I'm going to add in a little more information. I'll share the slide with you if you could send it out for those that want.
Absolutely. I'll send out an email tomorrow with the slideshow, and not a formal poll question, but just a question about Talmud and future series. Okay. Awesome.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yasher koach.
Thank you. All the best.
All right. We'll see you all.
See you, Rabbi.
Laila Tov. Have a good night. Oh, don't forget, for those of you on, in 2 weeks' time, Ema Arvin Simcha B'Simcha, but in 2 weeks' time, don't forget we have Jewish bioethics with acclaimed Jewish bioethicist, Rabbi Dr. Eddie Reichman. He's going to be speaking about all the latest cutting edge medicine from a halachic perspective, from the perspective of Jewish law, including viruses and diseases and vaccines and genetics and gene modification, CRISPR technology. You don't want to miss this. This is going to be incredible. It's applying Jewish law to the most cutting edge medical technology. 2 weeks time, Tuesday, January 19th, 8 p.m. Take a look for it on our website, intownjewishacademy.org/bioethics. You definitely don't want to miss this. Rabbi Dr. Reichman is an incredible presenter and one of the top world experts on these topics. So come and bring your questions because we'll have some Q&A also. Good. All right. Rabbi, Yasher Koach, it's great to see you. And it's good to see all of you. Steve and Donna and Sandrine.
Bye.